With future parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure addressing older parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you might begin to ask yourself some lore-themed questions. One of these being, do Pillarmen have stands or not? And this is especially prominent in the minds of people like Kayla Baye, who can't seem to get their minds off of the Pillarmen.
Respect the Pillarmen. Respect the Pillarmen.
I'm just kidding, Caleb, I love your stuff. But thanks to the research I did into my Cars video, and the analysis I did of his race, I found a few interesting details about the Pillarmen, which might shine some light on mysteries like this. Now, one of the main reasons this question is raised is because in Chapter 42.5 of Steel Ball Run, there is a mention of tools created to help people unlock stands. Listed in this tools of creation are the Devil's Palm, the Stand Arrow, and the Stone Mask. But I'll get to that specifically afterwards. So with that out of the way, the first thing we must do before starting any of this is be reminded that the Pillarmen are not humans, and therefore wouldn't be affected the same way that humans are when they use the Stone Mask. Though this doesn't mean they can't have stands, because we know that in later parts non-humans can have stands, and it's even possible that possible aliens have stands, so we won't even get into that. But this does mean that the use of the Stone Mask on humans may not be the same effect for Pillarmen. The Pillarmen display a wide range of abilities from Karz's Bone Blades to Wamu's Divine Sandstorm to AC/DC's Boiling Blood, and all these abilities seem to be non-standard for the basic Pillarman, as the original Pillarman race used regular tools such as swords and spears instead of magic for their weaponry. It's also safe to assume that the original Pillarmen had limitations of their own for the amount of punishment they could take, since Karz is able to kill them without Hamon. But we also know that Pillarmen are above humans as they were worshipped as deities, so that their strength has to be, they have to be stronger than humans. So, with those assumptions, you can probably assume your average Pillarman is about as strong as a human vampire, or roughly around that level. Now, when Karz and the Pillarmen don their stone masks, they seem to be able to use some form of special ability. We see Karz in the past wielding his Bone Blade, and it's pretty fair to assume that AC/DC also developed his Boiling Blood around this point. These abilities are very similar to how stands function, as they were brought on by a trial of strength and were granted to the users after they passed. It's also fair to say that the Stone Mask was designed to tap into the Pillarmen's unused abilities. So, we could leave it at that if it wasn't for Araki in his future interviews. Araki mentioned that if the Part 3 crew went back in time and went to the period of Part 2, and if they looked at young Joseph, they'd be able to see Hermit Purple wrapped around him because of his Hamon use, meaning that if the Pillarmen had stands themselves, they would be able to see these vines wrapped around Joseph, which they never mention and never bring up, meaning that the Pillarmen most likely do not have— Hold it! Araki also mentioned in that interview about Hermit Purple that it is a visualization of the ripple itself, and that it's a stand form of that, meaning that the Hamon clan, when they would master the ripple, would also have this wrapped around them, meaning that if Karz and the Pillarmen did in fact see a Hamon user, they would see Hermit Purple if they had stands. So that means that they'd be able to distinguish between Hamon users and regular humans, meaning that it wouldn't be weird to them and they wouldn't point it out. Objection! That'd be some pretty strong evidence if not for the existence of Santana. Living only 1/10 of the rest of the Pillarmen's lifespan, Santana was abandoned in Mexico before the Pillarmen had even a run-in with the Hamon clan, and therefore he wouldn't be able to recognize Hamon or Hamon users like the rest are. He's also incredibly smart and aware of his surroundings and is able to learn faster than most humans. So if he would have noticed Joseph having Hermit Purple wrapped around him, he would have pointed it out, or at least made mention of it, because he looks different than the rest of the humans in the room. He's a different primitive than the rest of the primitives around him. Objection! Yeah? Well, did Santana even use the Stone Mask? What evidence do you have that he has? Because all of his abilities are shown by the other Pillarmen, and that means that he has no special ability of his own. He probably has no stand power of his own, because he probably never used the Stone Mask because Karz abandoned him long before he had the ability to. Gotcha! The evidence for Santana's use of the Stone Mask comes from him being alive after coming in contact with the sun. You see, the primitive Pillar people themselves would be destroyed if the sun ever came in contact with them. The rays would destroy them. But Santana is able to have a small fight with Joseph, who is a Hamon user, in the middle of the Mexican desert at high noon. and he doesn't die. In fact, his body turns to stone and he still lives inside it. This must mean that Santana used the stone mask at some point, but he wasn't able to keep up with the rest of the Pillarmen in developing their abilities because of his young age. This also means that he couldn't see Hermit Purple on Joseph, and by that, he didn't have a stand. Because we know that even before your stand ability, manifests itself, you're still able to see stands if you have a stand inside of you, or you have a stand on the rise. Look at Holly in Part 3 when she's able to see Star Platinum and all the other stands. This basically leaves us with the idea that Pillarmen probably do not have stands. But that leaves us with a question. What does the stone mask have to do with unlocking stands like it says in Steel Ball Run? Well, as I see it, that picture is more referring to Dio as himself. Dio, I remind you, is 120-something years old, and he would have died long before the stand arrows were even discovered, meaning that he would, without donning the mask, not have received a stand, so the mask is partially responsible for him obtaining the world. For him to be able to gain a stand, he needs to live an extra long lifespan. But that's just my opinion. If you have your own interpretation of how the stone mask plays into stands, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to help make more videos like this, or help me make more videos like this, I have a Patreon over at patreon.com/MetinotTheBadGuy. And have a fucking lovely day. God, it's been long since I said that.